let's go to our main segment. We're going to transition and do a shoe review with a couple comparisons and things like that. One of you guys just make sure you have the specs pulled up, and we'll run through those in a little bit. But
I don't have the heel and forefoot memorized. I have everything else memorized.
I've got those.
Perfect. We are going to be talking about the Saucony Kinvara 13, not the 12. DJ's holding the 12, but we will be comparing it. So why does one of you just tell us a little bit about what is the Kinvara? It's got a cult following for sure. What is the shoe? Where did it come from, and where is it going?
I've run in this shoe since version 1, so this is kind of, there's definitely, I'm trying to be very careful with my review because there's a lot of bias there. So I was great. David has written his review, so he did a really, really good job. So this shoe was introduced as a lightweight trainer, and then back in the day, this came out right when all the minimalist stuff was coming out, and it was a really nice balance between a traditional cushion trainer and some of these minimalist shoes. And I think it still does that really well, where it is very light. This one's the lightest one at 7.2 ounces for men's size 9, which is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that's
nuts.
Crazy.
It's still got a solid amount of cushioning. So there's 28.5 millimeters in the heel and 24.5 in the forefoot. And I think that includes the insole. So that's definitely lower than a lot of shoes today, but there's still some solid cushioning here, but it's non-plated, right? So it's this very awesome, I hesitate to say simple because there's a lot of interesting things that go in here, but it's kind of like this awesome, simple, lightweight shoe that's still got a little cushioning that you can use for workout. Some people are going to use it as a daily trainer. And it's really cool is it's kept its essence despite all the changes that's happened in the industry. There's some, they've definitely rockered some components a little bit more, but it's really your really lightweight trainer, lightweight like workout shoe that can also easily be a racing flat for a lot of people. So I feel like we were talking about performance trainers last time, and this is definitely one of them that really hits a lot of that stuff. But this version, I think, kind of the weight makes it err a little bit on that faster side. But that's also Saucony's advertising it as like speed. So.
Yeah,
in 2 seconds it's a performance trainer.
It kind of
what are
in 2
what are
seconds.
the major updates to the shoe compared to the 12? Because the 12 was the big overhaul.
They did the upper. That's like fully redone. I mean, the tongue's entirely different. The mesh is entirely different. I'm not sure about the counter. I think the counter is pretty similar.
Let's dig into it then.
If we got both of them,
dig into how it fits and what the upper's like and the heel counter and tongue. Like, give us some details.
Yeah, I mean, the fit, ironically, is actually still pretty similar to the last one, I think, as far as dimensions go. I think they did a great job on the last upper, and I think they did a great job on this upper. But I think it comes down to the materials. The mesh is much more of an airy mesh. It feels more like a plush kind of premium trainer, but it's still stripped down, which is really interesting from a weight perspective because they were able to drop the weight, make that tongue a little bit more padded. If you look at the original one, this is a thin tongue. I mean, we're talking about like a little like suede thing right here. And I know that some people had a little bit of irritation with that. I actually liked it, but they did a great job with the update as well. And so it's a little bit more of an airy mesh upper. There's still some overlays that go through that do help support things around there. The counter kind of funnels right into the sidewall, just like the last model did. So really, those are kind of the big changes. Is like the actual material itself, where it feels a little bit more plush and comfortable, but it's also still lighter and more airy, which is a weird contrasting like double to make. Yeah. So I think they did a great job. I mean, I honestly forgot it was on my foot a lot of times.
Rigid heel counter.
Yeah. I mean, I think I gave them an A on the upper on the review.
I'd echo what David said, where it feels like the upper got lighter. And now, obviously, it did, right? Because that was the major change. But it felt lighter on my foot while feeling more secure at the same time. Where the 12 was fine. It just wasn't like anything to be like, oh, it was just fine, right? Whereas this, when I put this on, I was like, wow, I actually felt like I had a little bit more forefoot room just because the upper is just a teeny. It felt a little. Feels like there's a little bit more stretch, but it's still, it secures your foot really, really well. And what's cool to see, like this kind of upper, this stuff tends, in my experience with this type of mesh material, tends to last a lot longer. So when the Kinvara 1 and 2, believe it or not,
Oh, people were blowing through those things.
Believe it or not, that is one of the only shoes where the sole lasted longer than the upper for me. Where the sole was fine, and I would blow holes in the upper, and it was done, which is, not normal for me.
Yeah, I know multiple people that blew through that
Would
upper.
you guys?
It's good.
Would you guys say that? I know you compared it, and you said it fits similarly, and Matt, you said a little bit more roomy than the 12.
Just a teeny bit.
How would you describe the fit if you hadn't ran in any of them? Is it narrow? Is it like what kind of fit does it have?
It's pretty normal for me. I mean, it's normal through the heel, normal through the midfoot, maybe slightly wide just because of the material, but I mean, I'd still say normal, and then the toe box and forefoot would be like normal to slightly wide. So it's not a snug fit. That's kind of how I would classify it.
You would describe it as like a snug performance fit.
No, but you can still lock it down. It's like that hybrid between a performance fit and like a trainer fit. Like a plush trainer fit. That's kind of like the interesting thing about this shoe is that it's very much a hybrid and just like rides the midline of almost every category.
I totally agree with David. I think that's the perfect way to describe it, where it's surprising where you put it on because you think it's going to be way narrower and way firmer. And you're like, wow, this actually not how it feels, where there's more room than you would expect, but you can still lock it down. So it should work for, a variety of people around that normal foot width. Like it's not going to be those who have super wide feet. This might be a little problematic. But yeah, it's just a nice upper. It's got a nice fit.
Yeah.
Again, awesome. Biased because I've run almost every version.
No, it is though. I mean, this is one of my favorite uppers of the year.
What's really interesting is I felt like the 12, like the upper was fine and it did its job, but it did feel cheap to me.
Interesting.
In a little way, like where it was so thin and it was just one layer. I feel like this has more structure to it, though it lost weight. It just is a huge paradox to me.
Yeah, they did a great job
to the upper. So let's move on to ride then. This is a full EVA base. You have their little cutout and the guidance line that follows all the way up. Not a lot of rubber on the outsole, just a little bit posterior lateral, and then in the intermedial on the front and the inside. What do you guys think about the ride of this shoe? And any differences from the 12 as well? Talk about it on its own, but also comparing to the update.
Let it be known that I have 35 miles on this and the outsole is still intact. I'm just saying. This is pretty good.
That's actually amazing.
Hey, there we go.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I've always been amazed by the Kinvara durability. Like, even for having so much exposed EVA, it does not shred up. Like, this has like 100 on it, I think. More. It has like around 150. And it's like still holding up quite well. That's the Kinvara 12, but there's no change in between that and this one. This one has maybe like 30 or so,
Dang, that 120, that's crazy.
That's impressive. So ride wise, there's still decent ground feel. It's not a barefoot minimalist shoe, right? So there's still some cushion between there. It's not firm though. I always expect it to be firm. It's like this nice balance between the two of them, where if you're jogging around, it's not as much cushion as a max cushion shoe, but there's still some protection there. And when you start picking up the pace, it pops off a little bit. Again, it's your foot, right? Because it's got a flexible forefoot, and that is noticeable. But I also like the heel. It's fairly smooth with the bevel. So overall, it's that same thing that David mentioned, where it seems to sit between a lot of areas, which is again where you would want a performance trainer to be. I wouldn't categorize it as hard, firm. I wouldn't categorize it as soft. It kind of flexes in the middle. I shouldn't say that. It doesn't flex here. It flexes
the review easy, right? Like, no. It's like it just rides the midline of like literally every category. Is it firm? No. Is it soft? No. I guess it's really flexible. That's probably the only thing that it would like, okay, that's a flexible shoe. Like where it's on one end of the category, but like everything else, it's just straight down the middle.
That's probably the
even in like
go for it. That's probably the one word of caution I would say. Oh, my bad.
That was a Midwest. Have you guys ever? I don't know, a Midwest four-way stop where like everyone's saying like go ahead, and then everyone starts to go at the same time, and then everyone stops, and then they say okay, no, you go, and you're there for like 5 minutes waiting for somebody to go, but everyone doesn't want to go, but everyone wants to go.
I'm gonna go because I live in LA, and so we cut everyone off. So. I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not kidding. So that's the one area that I would warn people about. If you've been running in kind of max cushion, stiffer shoes, you come to this, make sure you take your time because your foot is probably not going to be used to moving this much and having that much flexibility. So do make sure you transition. As much as I love this shoe and I was like, oh, I'm going to put this on for my training miles, I was definitely fatiguing after like 8-ish miles. And I'm like, oh, I'm not used to this as much anymore. My body got used to it over a week or so, but it's different. It doesn't have a plate. It doesn't have max stack height. Body's going to be might be working a little bit more in different ways. So take your time.
Yeah, I agree completely. The only thing I will say is because it rides that midline of everything, like it does lose a little bit in that responsiveness category for me. This shoe is all you. It lets you do you. So what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. But the one thing I noticed through the forefoot, it's a little bit slappy at fast paces. Everything else is fine. But when you're really trying to turn over and go fast, like because of how much flexibility is here, it can be a little bit slappy up in the forefoot. And then it's like you kind of have to like flex over it and then push off. Whereas I would kind of want just a little bit more rigidity. I mean, like in the review, I wrote about it, but I kind of said just tiny bit more outsole coverage, maybe. Just something to firm that forefoot up while still keeping it flexible. It almost feels a little overly flexible for like fast for me. Like workouts and stuff like that. I mean, like, I guess like track workouts and things. I guess road workouts are still fine.
I like the...
But other than that, it's pretty good. I mean, it covers pretty much everything you need it to cover.
I like the idea of using outsole for the creating a stiffening agent. I think that's pretty great. So let's move on. We actually have a lot of questions from people, and we wanted to talk about them because they're asking a bunch of comparison questions between the Kinvara and some other things. But here's a couple questions that we've had from people. And Matt, this will actually be one for you to speak into. So I hope that you're ready. But Genisman Runner wants to know, Genisman,
yeah.
I hope I'm not butchering that.
Yeah. How
does this compare to the Kinvara 2?
Oh, I could actually answer that question. This version feels like it has more flexibility up front compared to that one, and then the upper is very different. Where back in version 1 and 2, the upper was very thin. It was that kind of like paper-like material. This is a different, and it's kind of a softer mesh. So they will both breathe the same. It's just this one's going to be a lot softer on your foot.
What about underneath?
And the last thing I would underneath, and then the other thing is the transition here at the heel is also a lot better. So more flexible here, and a better transition at the heel because the 1 and 2 had that kind of like more blocky heel, which once you broke it in and it compressed, it was fine. This just transitions better. And I would also say that they've redone the midsole too, so there's just a little bit more pop.
For someone who liked, for someone who liked the 2. Would you say that this is like going back to roots at all? Or is it just so different now? Like there's just a different world that the original Kinvaras don't exist.
I don't think that's the right way. Did I not answer the original question?
Did.
So I just
I'm
went
asking.
off my own.
You did. No, you definitely did. No,
Okay.
You did.
That does happen a lot. So the originals are not dead. This is just an evolution where if you put this on, you'd be like, yeah, this is a Kinvara. Is it a refined Kinvara? Has it evolved since then? Yes, but it's not dead. It still carries that kind of like soul.
Cool. No pun intended.
Yeah,
Carrying the soul.
Yeah,
it has not lost its soul because
actually, I saw a pretty cool.
Fairly
photo.
durable.
What was the photo?
Yeah.
There was like a trailhead, and it said something as like lost souls, and then it was just like a bunch of like shoes like hanging off of it. It was a pretty sweet picture. Yeah.
The one thing I do have to say is that it's not as good on trails anymore. That was one thing with the triangular lugs from the early versions. It actually gave really good grip on trails, and I used the original Kinvaras as trail shoes. This I would not do. This does not have that same kind of grip. This is definitely more of a road shoe. Although David would probably argue with me because everything apparently is a trail shoe in his eyes.
Yeah, that's my bad. I definitely took the Endorphin Pro through like a good 6 miles of trail today.
It's not optimal, whereas the lugs and the original ones dug in better. Could you do it?
As we do.
But
all right, next question is from Mauro Campa, and he wants to know what's it like to compare this shoe to the New Balance Rebel V2. So I don't know. I haven't ran in this version yet, like I said, but you're looking at like is kind of traditional as we get, all the way to what New Balance is doing in there, like when they're trying to push the envelope. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, but there's a couple of big differences as well. I mean, I think the first one's a pretty obvious one. We're talking about different midsoles. This one is a supercritical, very soft, very bouncy midsole. That changes a lot of things. However, they're similar weights. They're, for the most part, for all intents and purposes, they're both performance trainers, both relatively flexible and can get the job done, kind of like that Swiss Army knife of a shoe. There's a little bit more rigidity here. So I feel like I get a little bit more snappiness and responsiveness, and I think some of it's just quite literally from outsole coverage. There's no plate or anything in there.
In the Rebel.
Whereas, like I said earlier, this shoe is literally all you. I mean, there's a certain purity aspect to that, but this is kind of like that bridge where you're starting to approach a shoe that can handle the track a little more, and it's a little bit faster and snappier, and you can really just like pound into it. So they're similar in the aspect of like weight and drop ratio and category, but as far as the ride goes, I think this is going to lean a little bit more into that faster realm, where this is probably going to lean a little bit more into that trainer realm.
This faster meaning
again,
Rebel.
Different midsoles, different rigidity.
This faster you held up the Rebel.
Yeah, sorry. For the listeners, the Rebel is going to lean a little bit faster, a little bit more performance ready, whereas the Kinvara is going to lean a little bit more into that trainer category. Not that you can't go fast or slow in either. That's just kind of where they start to delineate on that spectrum.
I find it so interesting that, like you said, on paper, they're relatively similar shoes from, if you were to look on paper, besides the midsole material, which is obviously a huge difference. And I think that creates two very different experiences where I don't think you would be able to say, if you like the Kinvara, you'll probably also like the Rebel, because they're different.
Right,
they're different shoes, but because of that midsole, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm dying. But there's
man, we're all tired tonight. It's all good.
They're so different because of that midsole, and I think you get that new age kind of bounce cushion feel from the Rebel. And then, like you said, this shoe, the Kinvara, I'm speaking about the 12 for me, but that shoe's all you, where you got to put it in there, whereas the Rebel's gonna feel like it's given back, or it gives you a soft feel, because that's like one of the softer foams that you'll step on. Besides, of course, the Bondi X, right, DJ?
Oh yeah,
that should be a DOR subjective question. Is the Bondi X soft or firm?
It's not soft. Believe me. Oh my goodness! If we drop this, drop it in the comments right now. Like, if you are listening to this, is the Bondi X soft or firm?
All right. So I'm gonna
max cushion, sure, but that thing is firm.
I might have to go by Snail's Pace here. This is a local running company near me, and so I might have to try it on to be the tiebreaker.
I think it's one of the softer
so
foams I've ever put on. And DJ had a very opposite experience.
It's like the definition of a firm rocker. Like, it's just like
it's
a
stiff.
dense foam with a plate, and it's just rockered the heck out of, like...
It's a soft foam.
It's not soft. Not soft.
This is exactly why we usually have multiple testers, because their perception of this can vary, right?
But you know what does soften it? The crash pad.
I agree. All right, let's move on. Ben Faulkner is asking, comparing the Kinvara 13 to the Atreyu base model V2, which we have not tested, but we have tested V1. So, DJ, why don't you talk about similarities, differences between those two?
Again, it's different, but same. Like, we're talking...
It's so funny. We've kind of said the Kinvara is kind of like everything. And so every comparison's like, it's different, but it's the same. But it's the same, but it's different.
Maybe we should clarify that, like, yes, they're both lightweight trainers, but let's talk about how they're different.
Oh, everything's fine.
The great thing about this is, like, this isn't funny. But we're laughing really hard.
No, not at all.
We're problematic. All right, DJ, you got to talk now. Similarities, different. How do they compare?
I gotta be smart for 5 seconds. So when you look at the geometry of it, the Atreyu is a lot more flat. I just can't get over Nathan laughing so much. There's a very, very slight heel bevel, but we're talking real slight. Whereas you're going to have a little bit of more of a geometrical component on the Kinvara, so a little bit more of a rounding through the heel, a little bit of a toe spring. I mean, it's still pretty flat. Like, it's not much. It relies more on the flexibility. Whereas, like, here, you're going to have a little bit more toe spring and a little bit more just rigidity through that platform. So they're both slabs of EVA. They both let you do you, but in different ways. The EVA that Atreyu uses is just firmer. And that's the entire base and platform that it sits on and goes through. And there's just less of it in the forefoot, and then it goes and it flexes more there. But that's really the only place in the shoe that allows for that, whereas the Kinvara is just really flexible throughout. Like, I can just bend and do whatever I want with that shoe, whereas I can't quite do that with the Atreyu. So there's a little bit more of a geometrical thing going on with the Kinvara. A lot more flexibility throughout the sole.
I'm still having giggle fits.
I think it's episode 76 is the first time we've all really lost it, so I feel like that's actually an accomplishment. So
that is an accomplishment. We made it 75 episodes before losing our marbles. I think that is worth a toast. Keep
I'd
going.
already lost
the
mine
battle lies
beforehand.
within.
That's hilarious.
Like,
all right.
But that's essentially the main difference. I mean, the Atreyu might be a tiny bit snappier. I don't know. The traction on these aren't great either, so it's kind of hard where, like, this EVA does seem to grip the road a little bit more. Like, the ridges here seem to do a pretty good job, whereas these ones on the Kinvara, it seems to grip the road a little bit more. You can kind of just see that on the camera, that it's a little bit deeper. Whereas, like, they exist here, but on the Atreyu, but they just don't really, like, my finger can just kind of slide all over them, and then it kind of has a little bit of a dynamic flexibility to it, but overall, again, similar but different. Like, the Kinvara is going to be a little bit more natural riding, I think. If we're going to go by, like, natural and, like, the shoe lets you do you, like, it's going to be the Kinvara. The Atreyu still has a little bit more structure as far as the actual platform goes. The upper lockdown is way better on the Kinvara, though. Like, the way it wraps and gets you onto that platform. This is kind of like a very basic, just, like... It's a very basic upper that laces down and does its job, but it's really, there's not much else to it.
Keeping in mind that this is V1, and they do have a new shoe, so we don't know.
Exactly. So I haven't had version 2. Like, I'm happy to test it if anybody from Atreyu is listening, but yeah, I enjoyed Atreyu V1, would like V2, but I think the biggest comparison actually would be...
Nathan being subtle in the background. Like, no,
my next question was actually going to be... What other comparisons do you have? That's the final question to wrap things up.
This is going to be maybe a polarizing answer, and I don't have it on hand right here, but it's basically a higher stack, more trainer-ready Hoka Evo Reihi.
Oh, wow.
Very flexible, low-riding EVA sole, and the transition through the heel is a little bit better on the Kinvara for me, but overall, that's kind of what my brain goes to first. Would be the Hoka Reihi, but that's a racing flat. That's like a 5K, 10K racing flat. So it's a different shoe. It's a different category of shoe entirely. But yeah, it's kind of like that hybrid of what we're talking about. And so if you're transitioning into some of these lower profile shoes, like, it could be a good transition point.
I'm actually totally with you on the Reihi being a very similar shoe in terms of how flexible it is, especially in the forefoot, a little more rockered, really nice upper. Like, I really enjoyed the Reihi upper.
Yeah, they got to bring back those
really
Matrix uppers, right?
Yeah, but different. Something not as similar, but a shoe that kept making me thinking about it is actually the DS Trainer. Not from a stability standpoint, but actually how it the ride. This is more stiff. There is a little like plastic thing, extended forefoot torches. That's not what ASICS calls it. But in terms of how close, trusting, thank you. I always forget that word. How close to the ground this is, but how surprising. There's a surprising amount of cushion for how close to the ground it is. Why am I repeating myself?
This is great.
Maybe I'm finally having a stroke. I can't do this anymore.
I think this is...
But yeah, I think the DS Trainer comes to mind again, especially as a performance shoe, because this one can really move, and I really like that. And I found the Kinvara can do that too. But the Kinvara just has, as David's mentioned, has less structure to it, a lot more flexibility, where this is a little more snappy. Yeah. But there's a lot of comparisons. I think, bring back performance trainers.
And I think too, just the polarizing opposite of this category, but still saying like we said earlier, on paper similar, would be this.
Oh guy. Yeah.
A little bit more beveled, a lot more outsole coverage. The foam itself is firmer.
Yeah.
The what and the is and the that I'm talking about is the Skechers Razor 3. This is the cloak version. It does have full outsole coverage rather than that panel that was missing on the medial aspect of the original Razor. But it's a relatively balanced rockered ride, a little bit of a snappier feel to it, and really the only flexibility is in the forefoot, and it's still not even that much there. Like this is, but it's like 6 point something ounces, like
6.4,
somewhat similar stack
6.7,
heights.
6.4.
Yeah,
and the drop ratio is like 4 as well, 4, I think, right? Yeah, so on paper it's pretty similar, but the way they ride are entirely different. So
such a good shoe.
Just to get you the whole gambit of performance trainers without plates.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we are going to wrap things up. That is your experience of episode 76, and we hope that there was something in there that was useful for everybody, or at least entertaining or something.